And welcome back to the NWA 1983 project. I'm your host, Lex G. And today, guys, we have a very special guest. We have my longtime personal friend and wrestling belt enthusiast, Michael Swanson. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, fantastic. So, Michael, I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions so we get the audience familiar with you a little bit. So tell me, when was the first time you started watching wrestling?
Oh, geez. I was around 5 years old. Puts around 87, though my earliest memories are probably closer to around 89.
Okay.
So it was about between 5 and 7.
So you vaguely remember like the Andre Hogan feud and wrestling the build up to WrestleMania 3, but your mind doesn't really get going until like maybe right after the Savage Hogan feud, like he's doing his Hogan and Barber versus Zeus and Savage stuff.
That's where I came in, was at least with my memories anyways. Hogan and Beefcake versus Zeus and Savage. That was a real big thing. And then Ultimate Warrior was coming up through the ranks. Jake the Snake was big at the time. Huge fan of Demolition. That was my tag team back then.
That's where me and you agree, because my favorite tag team of all time is Demolition. I thought they were fantastic. Awesome. A lot of people say they're Road Warrior clones. I'm like, no, Road Warriors are Demolition clones. But I'll get a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, we'll see. For me, that's who I saw first. I grew up with Demolition and then found out about the Road Warriors / Legion of Doom later. So for me, Demolition was the original.
The big difference between the Road Warriors and Demolition is that Demolition could work. They could sell.
Very true.
They can do stuff.
Very true.
Especially with Billy Eadie in there, the Masked Superstar. He's a workhorse, so he's fantastic.
Oh, both of them were. And they could alter their style to whoever they were wrestling. I think they were a far more well-rounded team.
Like, even if you go back to the matches like the Brainbusters versus Demolition and Tully and Arn versus the Road Warriors, I think the Demolition Brainbuster matches are better matches.
Oh, fantastic, yeah. No comparison.
So, Michael, where in the United States are you from?
Originally, I'm from a little itty-bitty teeny tiny town called Sheboygan, Michigan. Yes, it's a real place. You can look it up. And about 7 years ago, I moved down to Florida. No snow. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of snow. Being here in New York, it can be rough at times. Like the weather here makes no sense. It's either 100 degrees or it's below zero. It's weird. I don't know. I don't get it. You get that crazy rain though, which to me is
it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Guys, I just want to recap everyone what's going on with the NWA 1983 project. Now, for those of you who may not have watched an earlier episode, what this is exactly is it's my dream world. It's my fantasy, so to speak, in a clean way. The premise is, what if the NWA went national first? So obviously you know that the WWF at the time went national. I guess you would say late 83, early 84, when their true expansion began. That time frame became debated, but I consider WWF going national when they pretty much acquired the USA Network from San Antonio, from Joe Blanchard. And then they had Backlund and they went to Hogan and they kind of really exploded from there. So what I'm saying is, and what Bill Watts once said, is the person who gets there with the most first usually wins. So we're doing a rapid expansion. Myself being the new president of the NWA with my own territory that's based out of Los Angeles. We are currently working with Jim Crockett Promotions, Memphis and the CWA Group, Portland, St. Louis, Kansas City, Mid-South, World Class Championship Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and EMML from Mexico. So those are the kind of our promotions that we're working with here. We have full access to the rosters. We book the shows. And we want to give everyone a look and a feel about what wrestling was like in 1983, the last year of the territories, I like to say, before it kind of all kind of disintegrated and you ended up with your WCW and your WWF. So far we are in month number 2, week 3. And this show would take place in Portland, Oregon. The main event for this show will be, and a fantastic main event it is Roddy Piper versus Wahoo McDaniels for the United States Championship. We also have Curt Hennig taking on Harley Race for the NWA World Championship. In addition, we have Jesse the Body Ventura taking on Ricky Steamboat which should be a classic encounter there. So real excited about those matches, and you'll be seeing those throughout this program. So we're going to talk about Pacific Northwest Wrestling, also known as Portland Wrestling. So Portland Wrestling was founded in 1925 by Herb Owens. Obviously, it's the Northwest Territory, so that's, Washington, Portland, that kind of area over there. It was one of the founding members of the National Wrestling Alliance in 1948. When Herb passed away, Don Owen took over for him. And it was one of the top territories into the early 90s. So they had a hell of a run. We're talking about 1925 to around 1990, 1991. So it was one of the, I guess, the gold mines or the diamonds of the NWA, although they didn't get the NWA champion as much as, say, like Georgia or the Crockett's or World Class. They're kind of a island all to its own. So a lot of people got their starts there. It was one of those territories where you either started your career or finished your career. So even a young George Wagner started out in Portland, and he would be more famously known as Gorgeous George, started out in Portland wrestling. So you also had guys like Roddy Piper, you had Dr. D. David Schultz, you had Jimmy Snuka. The Von Erichs would come in quite a bit because they had a working relationship with World Class Championship Wrestling, so you saw a lot of Von Erichs over there. You would see Playboy Buddy Rose before he got in the blowaway diet, which is fantastic. Stan Stasiak, Dutch Savage, Colonel De Beers all got their starts over in Portland. So unfortunately, when it got to the late 80s and Vince is taking over the world, their promotions are losing time slots and all that kind of good stuff. It's funny, and I guess, Michael, you'll find a little irony in this. Portland Wrestling was the last of the original NWA groups remaining in the NWA. So this little territory over in Portland was the last one to go down, which is ironic there. Towards the end, though, I felt the promotion did pick up, and you saw a lot of guys like Art Barr, Scotty the Body, also known as Raven, Steve Dahl, and Rex King were all in there trying to make that, really, really pop the territory again. And they did well for a while, but again, when it got back down to 1991, their main television sponsor, which is Tom Peterson's. If you watch any Portland wrestling, you'll see the commercials for Tom Peterson, and Tom Peterson himself would appear on Portland Wrestling. He would get like a little spot every once in a while to sell his wares, which was basically like stereos and TVs and stuff. And it's funny, in watching these episodes, like TVs were expensive back then. It was like $750 for a TV, and like 1980 money, which is like, I don't know, like $3,000 or some shit. Like, it's insane. Basically, Don Owens retired April 1992. Sandy Barr, which was the longtime referee, took over for him, and at that point they became like they stopped being part of the NWA and became more of an indie, independent. They had a bunch of different names, including Championship Wrestling USA, IGA Wrestling, are some of the names that they used. Now, in the late 2000s, there was a new Portland Wrestling that came out, and it was Frank Culbertson, and he worked for the television station that Portland Wrestling used to be on. It was on WB Network at the time. And he started running wrestling for a little bit. At that point, it kind of went down again and then went back up and then became Portland Wrestling Uncut. And then it was actually being booked in 2012 by Roddy Piper. They did have their own TV show, but eventually they stopped producing episodes. And now with Roddy Piper's death, I don't know if they're ever going to come back. So they haven't produced a new episode of Portland Wrestling Uncut since 2013. So that is a quick history of Portland Wrestling, Pacific Northwest Wrestling, Big Time Wrestling, whatever you want to call it. That is a small history of that. So, Michael, in watching Portland Wrestling, how do you feel it compared to a Jim Crockett Promotions or a World Class Championship Wrestling or a Mid-South? Do you feel that the production value was the same, better or worse?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned production value. That's the first thing I noticed, that the production value wasn't anywhere near, for example, Jim Crockett or Mid-South or Fritz von Erich was putting out with down in Texas. It had the feel of almost like an independent promotion that you'd see nowadays. It just had that small town kind of feel to it. The matches were great. They had phenomenal talent going through the area. It just would have been nice if they had more backing or more, bigger sponsors to, put more money into what they were putting out.
The Portland Sports Arena was a converted bowling alley, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Which is small, but the good thing about bowling alley kind of dips in the middle. So what would happen is that all the noise would go in and it wouldn't escape. So those places were loud as shit. So you could basically, it would just be a roar. And Raven actually said in one of his interviews that you could call spots out loud like this, like talking like this, and no one could hear you.
Oh, wow.
So that's how loud it was and how popular it was. I mean, you got to understand that Portland at the time, and then for the long time, previous, especially during the 80s, the only sports team they had was like the Portland Trailblazers. That's it. Only the Portland Trailblazers, that's the only sports team in town. So a lot of the wrestlers, was very much like Memphis. Memphis didn't have any teams at the time. So your local, your Roddy Piper was a huge star because that's the only sports star that you saw. So when you saw Roddy Piper out, he's the biggest star in Portland. And it's amazing. So that's why a lot of guys, they would leave and come back. Like Piper would leave and come back all the time because he had such an affinity for Don Owens. And I think Don Owens was like a really big father figure for him. He would even do this when the WWF came into Portland to run opposition to Don Owens. Roddy Piper would refuse to be on the show. He had that much respect for him. Overall, I mean, the look of it, there's a 2-camera shoot for the most part. I think there's one handheld that I saw, but it's basically all the hard camera, shooting across. Mm-hmm. And it is very indie. It reminded me of the WWF and their production value. They're very similar. At the time, you're talking about the late 70s, early 80s, the WWF wasn't known for their production value because they didn't have any.
No, back in the Madison Square Garden days, yeah.
Yeah. And if you watch any of if you watch Championship Wrestling, their TV show from beautiful Allentown, Pennsylvania, or White Plains, New York, it's trash. And then when you compare it to World Class that had 5 cameras and they had the handheld camera in the ring getting close-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like World Class still holds up now in comparison to like a lot of the other promotions.
Oh, yes.
Also watching some of the later shows, it definitely had an ECW type feel to it too, especially with that arena.
With the arena and also with the fans. They were rabid.
Yeah, they were insane.
Very much like your ECW fans in the mid and late 90s.
Yeah. In
Portland, they were, huge. And you didn't have guardrails. I noticed that. They could walk right up to the apron of the ring and start yelling and pointing and stuff. I mean, makes me wonder what would happen if they had like a decent heel, like for example, Bull Ramos getting some really good heat.
Yeah.
If they had to like really be careful with people coming into the ring and whatnot, if they ever had to hook or shoot.
Oh, I'm sure they did, especially back in the day. But are you really going to enter a ring that has Billy Jack Haynes in it, though? Is the question.
So. Personally, no, I wouldn't. Billy Jack Haynes could put me in a headlock and squeeze my head like a pimple. We don't really want to go there.
He's completely insane. He's out of his mind.
True. This is also true.
The hardest thing about Portland wrestling is trying to get into it in terms of a wrestling fan is that their footage doesn't really exist. Now, you might see an episode here and there on YouTube. If you know someone with a tape collection, you might be able to get a couple episodes, but they don't have a tape library, so to speak, like some of the other promotions. That's why the WWE hasn't purchased it, because there's no tape library to purchase. So what you're looking at for the most time is someone recording off of VCR, or maybe one of the boys have one of the tapes of the house shows, and that's basically it. None of their big shows are obviously taped. So trying to find footage on Portland wrestling was extremely difficult. Although I do have the best of Scotty the Body Volume 1 and 2 on DVD. So that's how I got my interest in Portland wrestling, is seeing Raven act like a goofball. And
with those bright pink tights, man.
He was ridiculous. He was... Okay, just for those of you who don't know what Scotty the Body, the character, is, picture it's 1989, 1990. Picture your rich white kid who like loves rap music, Picture that in like 89, 90. That's what Scotty the Body was. Like Vanilla Ice was like big at the time. It's sort of like that. He wasn't a rapper, but he would be like, he would say, he would use slang and it'd be off putting and a little bit jarring.
Coming out with the light cut with the big shoulders and the collar popped up, the mullet, the weird shaped 80s sunglasses.
Those are Oakleys, by the way. Those are confirmed by Raven that they were Oakleys.
That's all right.
And then he would be gyrating in the ring. Probably a skill that he learned from being a male stripper at one point in his life. So it's funny because he had valets. He had two different valets. I think one was Ginger, and I forget the second one's name, but they weren't hot. They weren't like super hot. Like we're used to valets like Miss Elizabeth, Missy Hyatt, that kind of level of valet. And like these girls look like they're just girls out of the crowd. Like they're not even dressed provocatively or anything. They're just like, oh, what? His big feud with Steve Dahl was it. Although you did have Al Madrill there, which is one of my favorites. Underrated wrestler, Al Madrill. He's hilarious and one of the best heels I've ever seen in my life. He is awesome. So, guys, if you don't know who Al Madrill is, look him up. He's pretty big in Texas as well. So he's definitely on some world-class episodes. But he's fantastic. And he had like his own little like Piper's Pit, but it was called Fiesta Gardens. And he would have an interview segment and just be ridiculous. And then there was one time where the Grappler and Scotty the Body, he had turned babyface. Scotty the Body had turned babyface towards the end of his run. Len Denton, the Grappler, and Scotty the Body had a sing-off. So, the next week they I think Scotty the Body Raven, I think he sang "Born to Be Wild." It's the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, I've seen people drunk doing karaoke that did a better job at singing. But he was the babyface, so he won the audience applause on that one, so it was all good. Another one of the big memorable angles was Piper came in, and you had Art Barr, one of my favorites of all time. Piper felt that Art Barr wasn't being, he wasn't mean enough, he wasn't nasty enough, he wasn't tough enough. So he turned him into Beetlejuice.
I love that segment.
It's just imagine being in the back and you're writing the show or you're doing some sort of creative, wherever they used to do back in Portland, and someone comes up to you is like, I got an idea, Beetlejuice. Like they had to be stoned out of their minds. And Portland being known as one of the big pot territories, I can definitely see that. So yeah. So it was a little 420 booking there. Art Barr took that gimmick WCW with him and became the Juicer. But I think when the steroid stuff started coming down, it was like, we can't have a character named the Juicer on our TV because it gives the wrong.
If people haven't seen that, go back, look it up on YouTube. It is classic Roddy Piper.
It was the point where he gives up his underwear, and like Roddy's like, I'm not touching that. It's gross.
Take the boots off. Come on, take them off.
Piper was the man over there. It's like there's probably no bigger story to come out of Portland wrestling, and with his tragic passing, recently, it is pretty sad. But Piper over there was like king. He could have stayed over there and drew money like Jerry Lawler in Memphis. I think that's pretty accurate statement there. That he was huge over there, and his feud with Buddy Rose. When you look at Buddy Rose, he's like obese. Not at the time, but he became worse later. Bleached blonde hair, but he can go. He could work.
Yeah.
He was in WrestleMania 1, for Christ's sakes. He was the mass execution of WrestleMania 1. He fought Tito Santana and lost.
So that's who that was. Okay.
Yeah.
I just actually watched WrestleMania 1 not too long ago.
Does that hold up? Does the show hold up overall? Because the worst thing about WrestleMania 1, for me, it's fucking Lord Alfred Hayes, man.
Yeah, he wasn't quite in his niche yet.
Like, he looks scared.
Oh, yeah, he's frightened. You can tell. He's nervous. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's kind of like, what am I doing? Where do we go? We're going to get these messages from these people. Okay, yeah. And just kind of, he's edit right there.
Yeah. he is like completely off his rocker. I don't know if he's on some sort of dope or he is drugged, but he almost ruins the entire show. Now he became better later on, but at that
Oh
point
yeah,
he was terrible. And now Al Hayes being a former wrestler himself, you'd think he'd be able to talk, but he got better. But that first WrestleMania was rough.
well, some guys, promos aren't their strong suit, but
But
I think he might have,
he's an
like,
interviewer. He's supposed to be able to talk. Like that's your only job.
he was probably nervous or frightened, or as like you said, he might have been on something. Who knows? But yeah,
But I don't understand like why didn't Vince do it himself? Because he was doing shit like that. So I don't know. Maybe he was just like, oh, I got to try to run the show or whatever. But the show wasn't even like that over the top. It's not any different than you would see in a normal Madison Square Garden show. Like you go for like the brawl to settle the law that happened a couple months prior to that. It's not any different than that. You know what I mean? So it wasn't. For a first effort, you would think you would be doing a lot more stuff. But I guess for the time, it's like, oh, okay.
it was also one of the first times. It was the first time they had tried to do something with closed circuit TVs nationwide.
Yeah.
Really pushing the envelope with what they had as a budget, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, that's the famous story is that if WrestleMania 1 didn't work out, Vince would have been out of business. And the money that he had for WrestleMania 1 was the money that he got for selling WCW back to Crockett or to Crockett.
Yeah.
So that was $1 million he invested in that of his WCW money, which is ironic, which is weird that Vince owned WCW before. And then it's a mess. It's weird. I went over that at one point in one of these episodes. Black Saturday. Look that up. It's insane.
Will do.
Yeah. So, Michael, being a championship belt enthusiast like you are, so I'm going to ask you, what are some of your favorite championship belts of all time?
You had to ask that question, didn't you? That's kind of like asking me where I like to eat pizza, because it's one of those, I like it all. If I was to put my finger on at least one that started the whole thing, it would be the WWF Heavyweight Championship from 88 to 98, the Winged Eagle. That's the one that started this whole fanaticism I have with championship belts. And from there, I started watching WCW. I fell in love with the television title at the time. The Big Gold has always been, I think, almost everyone's, at least one of their favorites.
Yeah, I think it's in top 5 all time, if not the first.
Oh, yeah. Easy. Especially the Krumrin that came out in 86. Gorgeous belt. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Going back and watching some of the older stuff, the NWA World Championship Wrestling from 85 on through to the 91 or whatever it is, when they actually became World Championship Wrestling, their television title. I also love that one. Made famous by Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, Dusty Rhodes. Oh, I can go on and on. You might want to give me a few more criteria here to break things down.
Well, I think my first question when it comes down to the Winged Eagle belt, how did you feel when Warrior would consistently change the straps on?
At the time, being a kid, I thought it looked cool. It was a cool novelty. But I prefer the black leather.
Yeah, over the white and the
Over
purple.
the white, blue, the red, the purple.
Yeah. He did it with the IC, but the IC only had one color. He only had the yellow.
True. He only did the yellow on that one.
You know what's funny? I just noticed the other day. I was looking at a picture of Savage, and he had his IC belt, and the WWF logo was in red. And then I looked at a picture at Mr. Perfect. There's no red logo on it. It's just gold. So I'm wondering when they made the switch on that.
Ooh, that's one to look up.
And did you notice that at all? That there's two different IC belts.
In recent years, yes. Because, the Intercontinental Championship, who did I grow up with that one? Shawn Michaels had that one. I actually remember watching Mr. Perfect with the Intercontinental Championship taking on Kerry Von Erich.
Yeah.
Texas Tornado at the time. That was, and Kurt Hennig was such a great heel. I hated him so much as a kid.
Kurt Hennig also got his start over in Portland as well.
Oh, there you go. A lot of guys, had their start over there. Iron Sheik was over there for a while.
Yeah.
In 80.
Sheiky Baby. Follow him
No,
on Twitter, by the way, because he's hilarious.
I
On
can only
Monday,
imagine.
on Mondays, he says fuck the Mondays. He gets your week
Is he going to
started
put
right.
it in the camel clutch?
He
Break
constantly
its back?
says that. Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna put so and so in the camel clutch and make them humble all the time.
Yes.
So he's awesome. And they also switched the tag team championships because I believe the original. Well, I say original, but the original one in the '80s was silver, and then at some point they
Yeah.
changed it to gold. So I
You
don't-
had the dual plated, and I want to say it might have been towards the like around 90, around the time that the Hart Foundation, I think, got them the second time around. Somewhere in there was Hart Foundation, Nasty Boys. In that time period, like around 90, I think it became the full on just gold plated as opposed to the dual plate
yeah,
with the nickel with the gold accents.
I think I like the nickel one. I think that was a better looking belt personally.
That was a gorgeous belt.
Yeah. So what are some of the worst looking belts that you've seen?
Ooh,
I'm gonna say like anything that's involved with TNA. They're pretty hard. I'm sorry, TNA fans out there, but their belts look stupid. Sorry.
actually, some of their tag team belts were okay. I haven't been too fond of their world titles after they got rid of the NWA Domed Globe, which is a classic title
Yeah.
for anybody. I was also not fond of the Divas Championship.
The butterfly.
I hated the big pink butterfly.
You gotta sell those merch, man. You gotta sell that merch.
You got to sell the merch, but something about it just didn't sit well with me. I don't know what it was.
I think calling the Divas Championship at all was gross.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. So much so that people understand that diva is not a term of endearment. It basically means you're a bitch. You know what I mean?
Pretty much.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they got away from that.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of controversy with the current championship belts.
Yes. I can understand some of the logic they're following. For example, it's like they want it to be more like a lot of people compare it to UFC, or if you want to go with like boxing titles, you've got one uniform championship belt for each weight class, which I understand.
Why does
But
one
that's
look?
never really
Why does
been-
one look like a fruit roll up? I don't understand. Why is it the fruit roll up championship? I don't get it.
Fruit Roll Up, Twizzlers, one of the two. Yeah, I really wish there had been a little bit more creativity into the creation of the Universal title. I was disappointed.
Let me ask you a question: would you have booed it in person if you were
Probably
there
not.
live?
My reaction probably would have been the same as when I saw it when I was watching the pay-per-view. Just like, oh, really?
It's funny because a lot of people will defend it and was like, "Why do you care about the look of a championship? Why does it even matter?" Blah blah blah. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have the belts look the way that they do. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't be selling them for merchandise.
True.
You know, that's a big thing. I know the reasons why the belt looks the way it does is because you remember a couple years ago where like teams would be winning the Super Bowl, they would have the big gold, right? They win the World Series, but it wasn't WWE branded on it. So they went with the big W in the middle. So when they gave them the championship belts, like the Super Bowl champions, it would have the WWE branding. So it's advertising.
Yeah.
But I'm not in love with the design for both belts. Like all those belts, I'm not in love with the design for them. I think they should have more of a classic design, but that's me being a old school apologist, I guess.
Well, I will say this for these ones, they're better than that Horde spinner belt.
Absolutely. Like how long they went with that for like 10 years? It felt like
10 years. It was a full decade.
holy shit. Then it stopped spinning. Did it break? I don't know what happened.
Well, I think the weight distribution of the logo that would spin would make it flip over and end up. It was top heavy, so it would end up upside down most of the time, or like on a weird angle. So they ended up doing a fixed version of it, and I think originally it was supposed to just be a gimmick title for John Cena, specifically for that character. But they started selling so many of them, they're like, well, we'll just keep it around, and enough people liked it. It wasn't one of my personal favorites.
Like watching like Triple H like walk around with that thing is gross.
Yeah.
You know, it was like ooh, and like CM Punk. If they were going to change the belt at that point, they should have done it with Punk instead of later on.
Oh, that would have been awesome. Yeah.
Because they had changed it. They changed the IC belt back to a classic style, not the classic belt, but a classic style for the IC belt. The US belt hasn't changed in, I guess, forever at this point since the spinner US belt from John Cena. So
I do like the United States title that they've got right now.
yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I prefer I guess you call it the Luger belt. The Luger belt from like 89 to whenever WCW closed. So I do like that belt.
Oh, I like the one that, for example, Goldberg DDP.
Yeah, that
was. Gotcha. Okay. Actually, another really good one was when they redid it back in, what was it, 86 with Nikita Koloff.
Yeah, with the little circles on the side.
Magnum TA. Yeah. That was a gorgeous title.
I think the Crockett's had a better mind for belts. Because like the IC belt is the IC belt and looks fantastic. The tag team titles were good, but I think the really nice ones came out of WCW and Crockett, except for the light heavyweight championship was ass. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Do you remember when Crockett had the U.S. belt, but it was just like the United States, like it was like the map of the United States, like in gold.
Yes, I've seen pictures of that one.
It's
big brown leather strap with a gold United States on it, and then like a couple little things on the side. It's
it's pretty horrid looking, to be honest. Like Piper had that belt before they went to the silver. They went to the silver silver NWA championship belt and called that the United States belt.
Yeah.
I think like in 80, 82 or 83. So
that sounds right.
So my United States championship belt that's in the game currently is the wrong one. It's I think it's like the 86, 87 one. So I have to go back and fix that and make sure it's like accurate, time accurate. They had these championships, so I have to go back and fix that at some point. So it's on my list of things to do. I do record these episodes, the gameplay footage, like 2 months in advance anyway. So
there you go.
Yeah. What do you know?
Oh, if you want to see some really chintzy belts, go back and watch stuff out of like either from like 1980 or before. For example, the International Television Championship out of Georgia Championship Wrestling. It's Austin Idol had it at the time, and it's this thin little like undyed piece of leather, really thin leather with a couple of real flat plates just stamped on there.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Poor Austin. What do you do?
And called it a day.
Like some of their belts, like the 70s, were like not the good time frame for belts. I mean, obviously that's when the NWA Championship, the one that I guess that's most notarized, other than the Big Gold.
Yep.
But the ones before that was like, it looked like purple velvet with like metal on it, and it was like.
Oh, Bruno Sammartino's belt.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. And like a lot of them were like super small. Like they look like belt buckles. A lot of them.
Yes.
So it's like, ooh. It's like, what
well, we've gotten used to the big plates and the championship belts that are huge and look like quote a championship belt. But if you go further back through history, I mean, even look at boxing championships.
They were small.
They were just little medallion on a red, white, and blue ribbon. A couple of medallions there. Lou Thesz's title looked very much like a boxing title.
Mm.
At least his original one. And then the next one from the 60s, wherein I think it was Pat O'Connor, Lou Thesz.
Is that one the weird red NWA logo on it?
Yes.
The one that Dory had?
Yes. Dory Jr., Harley Race's first run, and Pat O'Connor. Those were I think they held that particular version. And then it was changed to the domed globe that we know now when Jack Briscoe took over the championship.
From Race, right?
Yep.
The first one was red, right?
Correct.
And then there's a dent in it, and that's thanks to Terry Funk. And that's when Terry Funk got his own NWA. There was this angle in the 70s where Funk got his own NWA championship belt made and went around calling himself the NWA champion. So you know how they do like the two belts, like, oh, you're the fake champion, like that started like with Terry Funk because he's
nice.
Because he's insane, like because he's Terry Funk.
They've recycled that a few times. The Intercontinental title between Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
One of the first ever ladder matches in WWE at the time. They did it with John Cena and CM Punk.
Yeah. So there's nothing new in wrestling. This is the big thing. Like, we're waiting for something new. If you want something new, go look at an angle 1940 and just update it for today.
Pretty much. And that's been said for years and years, that there's nothing original in wrestling. It's just everything gets recycled. It goes away for a few years, they bring it back.
Yeah. And you just gotta tweak it and just modernize it for today. And that's how wrestling works. It's funny because I heard an interview with Kevin Nash talking about Bischoff, and he's like, Bischoff told me, it's like there's like 3 angles in wrestling, and here what they are. It's like, yeah, it's nothing more than that. It's just where it branches off from that point is where stuff happens. But
yeah,
what are you gonna do? So in terms of championship belts, what was the year when they went from Dome Globe to the Big? So they switched over from the Dome Globe to the Big Gold in '86. Is that correct?
Correct. I want to say it's around April, if my memory serves me correctly. It was the first time it appeared on TV. It was one where they had it had champions in the name of it. I don't remember if it was Champions or Night of Champions. I think it was Night of Champions 2.
Battle of the Belts 2.
Battle of the Belts. That was it.
That wasn't even a Crockett show. That was a Florida show. That's a great show, by the way. I have all 3 of them. The last one has Luger in it.
Oh, nice.
But Battle of the Belts, they lost power. I remember the first one they lost power, and like half things dark. So it's awesome. That's good stuff. Now, do you feel this is an interesting question? When they switched over from the Dome Globe to the Big Gold, now the Big Gold doesn't say NWA on it, and never had a company logo on it until it got to the WWE much later on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you think was that the beginning of the end of the NWA as we knew it?
Ooh, that is a good question. That's tough.
Because Crockett's president at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis is done at this point, I would assume. I'm actually pretty sure about that. Kansas City is done. By this time, Harley Race is in WWF, so Kansas City is done.
Yep.
Florida, Eddie Graham passed away. They're done for the most part. But Dusty, they're still hanging it on because it's part of the Crockett kind of.
This might have been Jim Crockett kind of showing his hand at possibly like intending to break away or to create his own world champion. I don't know.
Because he had stopped touring at that point too. So when I looked it up, I think it was late '86 is when he stopped touring. So he was only defending against Crockett guys. He wasn't defending it like a world class anymore.
Oh wow!
Wasn't going to Memphis
anymore. So that's probably a really good point to say. Put a pinpoint and say, this is probably when the NWA really did start to die.
And that's a damn shame because
oh yeah.
And what it was, I made this point on earlier shows, is that the NWA was built to fend off smaller outlaw promotions, but it wasn't built to take on another large promotion like a WWF or an AWA. If the AWA would have went national, and they had plans to, in '83, they were about to get a primetime special on CBS with Hogan, and then Hogan left. Unless Greg Gagne's lying, which he might be. But they were supposed to get like a Saturday Night's Main Event style show on CBS that featured Hogan. And I think that's where they were going to book Hogan to win the belt. But Hogan was like, screw you guys, I'm leaving. Which would have changed the course of history at that point, obviously.
Yes.
Because I think Hogan's last date in AWA must have been November or early December of '83, and he was WWF champion by early
January of '84.
'84. Which he won in his 3rd match. So I don't want to hear anyone that's bitching about Finn Balor winning the championship in his first match. Hogan only had like 2 matches before winning the belt. So.
Actually, another example of that, look at Paul White, Giant, back in WCW. Won the world title in his first match.
2nd match ever, by the way.
Yeah.
So 1st match in WCW, 2nd match like ever. It's insane.
Yeah. And they put the world title around him. I mean, that's saying something.
You heard that rib they did on him, right? So
yes. Make sure you wear the belt when you go out and about to let people know there's a new champ. So he's walking around the airport with the big gold belt around his waist and all the boys are,
They're
how's it
giggling.
going? How's it going? Until I think Sting is the one who smartened him up.
It's like, don't be an idiot.
What are you doing? Hogan told me to wear it. Put it away. Jeez, don't do that.
Sting. A nice guy right to the end, I guess. What are your thoughts on the NXT Championship?
Personally, at first, I was a little hesitant about it, but I like it. I think part of that has to do with the matches that go along with winning and defending that particular title. It adds more prestige to it. I mean, I've seen some all-out classics already in, what was it, when Neville was champion, him and Tyson Kidd, you had him and Sami Zayn, him and pretty much anybody. Fantastic. Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens is good no matter what they're fighting over. Just put the two in the ring and let them fight forever, as people like to chant. Finn Balor was all right. I hate to say this because I love the guy as a worker, but I think some of his matches got a little stale.
He was there too long. He was there too long. He was there for 2 years.
It's like the same high spots in every match. It's very similar to what people say about Ric Flair, as much as I love him. And Shinsuke Nakamura and Samoa Joe was fantastic. Kind of that stiff Japanese style, but it was a good match.
I think NXT is the best wrestling show currently, and it has a lot to do with a couple of things. Number one, their entire show is based on their championship, so it's like it's not a whole lot of storylines, not running a lot of angles. The storyline is like, I want to be the best, I want to be the champion, I'll do whatever I have to be the champion. That's the premise of the show. Where like Raw gets a little contrived, a little storyline heavy. They're getting better as of late. I think SmackDown is right now the superior show, if you want to. But I think NXT is a superior show out of all three of them. Plus NXT being an hour, you can consume them. They're very consumable. So if you want to watch it every week, you can because it's an hour. If you want to binge watch them and like catch up 10, 12 episodes, you can.
I've done that.
So imagine trying to catch up on like 6 or 7 Raws. That's like, that's too much time and your head would explode.
3 days worth.
Oh, I did recently watch 8 months worth of Superstars from 1990 and my head exploded. So
ooh, that'll do it.
It was good. It was good. It was a good show. It was just like,
you gotta love those enhancement matches.
It's not even that. It's the way they pound angles.
Oh yeah.
And it's like promo, recap, which is good because that's why all those angles and matches are super memorable, because they literally for 6-8 weeks they would pound the shit, and it'd be like something ridiculous like British Bulldog and the Warlord. Like we don't know if Dave Boy Smith can get out of the full Nelson. That's the angle for 8 weeks.
Honestly, if you do it right, is a fantastic angle.
Yeah.
A story about Tony Atlas when he was first starting off in Georgia, with bench pressing like 500 or 550 pounds or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. There was all this build up, and they built up, and then when he finally did it, it was like a couple weeks of work just to build up before he even stepped foot in the ring to wrestle. They just pounded out this whole thing with him being able to like do all this super strong stuff. So I mean, something as simple as that can work and get over if it's done properly and they actually focus on that particular angle. It doesn't always have to be about a belt, which those are some of the best ones, of course.
Yeah.
Or over a girl, or you cheated, or.
I just remember like when there was a point where it was like I was this close. There's actually 2 points where I was like, I'm never watching wrestling ever again. One was directly after the Benoit murders. I had a hard time watching wrestling after for a while.
That was tough. That was tough for me. He was one of my all-time favorites.
I was there at WrestleMania 20, so it's like, so that was a rough one. And then there was an angle where Triple H was feuding with Stephanie over the custody of their dog, and I wanted to punch myself in the face. That was Like when you have those meltdowns, like basically what Twitter is now, like
Yeah.
Twitter meltdowns. I just had one in person. It was like I lost it, and it took me a while to recover from that. But I did, obviously, doing a show on wrestling. But it brings up an interesting point that my wife made once. She was like watching Raw for no reason because she doesn't like wrestling. But she was like they're wrestlers, right? I'm like, yeah. It's like, why did they need a reason to fight? Like, wasn't that what they're supposed to do? Like, they're wrestlers. Like, you don't need a reason to play a football game.
Nope.
So, like, that's like it's an outsider's perspective. It's like, well, no, they got to do this, and this. Is like, no, they're like boxing or UFC. They're fighting for money or something. You know what I mean?
Then how do you get people to come in? You got to instill interest in the people,
Yeah.
people's interest into the match. So if they have no reason to be there, there's no reason for someone to pay a ticket to go watch these guys fight.
Right. It's strange.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like if I know it's real versus scripted, right? We see two boxers, right? And you're gonna go, pay $60 for everything to watch two people beat the shit out of each other. Wrestling's a little bit more nuanced since it is scripted,
Yes.
so you have to kind of build, interest through angles, interviews, and what have you.
Exactly. And that's the whole purpose of the business, is to make people pay a ticket to go watch the match.
Yeah. But it's funny because they do something a little bit different now, and it's opposite. They have matches to build an angle instead of having angles to build up to a match. It's really
Yeah.
But I think we saw that, and this is Monday, September 27th. I think we saw that last night with the Cesaro Sheamus match, which they took a pay-per-view match on pay-per-view, and now they're trying to build to an angle. I don't even know what happened tonight, but for an angle on Raw, which is a free show, which is weird to me. That's kind of backwards. What are you going to do at that point? Yeah.
Just keep watching and hoping
something
new comes along.
I had to alter my viewing. So I don't watch Raw, and I'll catch SmackDown every once in a while, but I just watch pay-per-views, and that's for me to be able to watch it. That's the only way I could watch it.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, I would most likely watch Raw and SmackDown if my job allowed for it, but I tend to work nights and can't usually catch it. So, and it takes forever for them to upload stuff on the WWE Network. So, it's just a matter of you just trying to keep up with angles. And really, I do the same thing. Pay-per-view's on. We'll watch that tonight.
Yeah.
With the exception of NXT, I watch that every week. I actually need to watch this past one. I've been busy, but it's on my list of things to do. I will be watching NXT.
And I'll say this about NXT: when I went to Takeover in Brooklyn, the first one, not the second one, it was amazing.
That was so good.
It was so good, and it was amazing. The crowd was super into it, and it's a big Brooklyn crowd. And
oh yeah.
And that year, Mick Foley didn't have to get on Twitter and yell at people, so that was a good thing.
True.
He just yelled at people again. Did you read that yet?
No, I haven't seen that one yet. I haven't been on my Twitter.
So Mick Foley, my longtime personal good friend and neighbor, by the way.
Oh, really?
He lives about 20 minutes away from me.
Nice.
He said, and I quote, "Anyone complaining about the Cesaro Sheamus finish, kiss my arse." Obviously, he meant kiss my ass, right?
Yes.
She's being cute. Because you're not supposed to be cursing at fans if you're an employee of a publicly traded company.
Indeed.
So I don't understand what Mick's doing. It'd be something similar to like the Jets, right? The Jets got beat up pretty bad on Sunday. They got blown out. And it'd be like Todd Bowles, the coach, going on to like the Twitter saying, "If you didn't like my play calling, you can kiss my ass." No, he wouldn't say that. It's ridiculous.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's like Mick, you're better than that. Please stop doing that. If someone's asking you to do that, tell them you don't feel comfortable doing it anymore. I think it's ridiculous. Please stop. No.
I might have to keep that in mind because he's supposed to be at a con coming up in Pensacola here in February. So, which I intend to be at because both he and Jake the Snake Roberts are supposed to be there. And
By the way, make sure to bring money because Jake the Snake will con you into buying a shirt like he did me.
he doesn't have to con me. I'm a huge mark. I'll admit it. I'm a big mark for the man.
He's like, "Hey pal, you want to buy the shirt?"
Absolutely.
I'm like, I don't know, Jake. He's like, "Come on, man." I'm like, "Okay." Like, he didn't have to try that hard, but he looked great when I met him too. So,
I mean, the man is still over to this day, and yeah, he doesn't have to twist my arm. Just like, hey, buy a shirt, okay?
yeah, Jake the Snake will be when we do the Superdome show in 2 episodes from now. He'll be facing Ronnie Garvin for the NWA Television Championship.
So, ooh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, he has his red karate pants on too.
Oh, jeez, from back in Mid-South.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be accurate, right? I try my best.
Yes,
and
yes.
I try my best to be as accurate as possible. If I'm not, my good friend Diggity Dave will tell me that I'm not accurate on something, and
there you go.
I'll go fix it. So I just want to shout out my good friend Diggity Dave who leaves comments for us. Just keep it up. Keep on leaving your comments and your concerns, and anything I mess up on, please let me know so I can go back and fix it. I'm still in the process of fixing some stuff in the game. But the thing I like about the project and the stuff that I take a lot of pride in is the arenas, because I like to put advertisement in them. So like you'll see an arena that has like an Atari logo, like where like the advertisement, because it's 1983, right? So I do like Atari, I do Return of the Jedi, I do Colt 45 with Billy D. Williams in it, because it's that time frame. So what kind of sponsors would they have? They would have those sponsors. So I try to be as accurate as possible with some of the arenas, but you can only do what you can do with the game engine. Unfortunately, at some point we're going to do an overall review of WWE 2K16 because 2K17 is coming out very shortly, and I'm not done with 2K16, so we gotta kind of pick up the pace and get these out a little bit quicker so we can go into 2K17.
Yep.
But the game, I'll tell you this about the game though, about 2K16, it's remarkably deep in some areas and then shallow in others. So, for example, I have a Mid-South Wrestling arena. It looks good. Got the logos on there. It looks great. My referee's wearing a WWE referee shirt. I can't change it.
Ouch.
It takes you out of it, right?
Yeah.
Your announcers are Michael Cole, JBL, and Jerry the King Lawler, which gets interesting when I do matches from Memphis because it's Jerry Lawler calling his own match, which is weird. It's like some sort of...
That's a paradox.
Yeah, it's weird. He's wearing some sort of weird affliction shirt, which I wish he would stop wearing those.
Yeah.
Like that was it was cool 10 years ago, but you shouldn't be wearing those ever, Jerry. I love you. Stay away from those young girls, Jerry. I tell you this all the time I see you. Jerry, please stay away from young girls, man. Like these 20, 22-year-old, 23-year-old girls, and they're no good for you. I was just listening to Jerry Lawler on the Steve Austin podcast. It's really good stuff, so.
Oh, it's got to be good.
Yeah, no, I've been listening to 605 podcast. I've been listening to Jim Cornette, and of course, I don't really like Stone Cold podcast because Stone Cold asks questions funny. I don't think he's a good interviewer. Like Jericho's a better interviewer than Steve Austin. But Steve Austin gets the best guests, though. So it's like
he does get some really good guests.
So it's like you have to listen to him because you want to hear what these guys have to say. But I think Jericho,
the Ross Report.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I like it because Jim Ross doesn't sound like so angry like he normally does anymore. Like I think that kind of dissipated a little bit. So
he also has a broad variety of guests. I mean, he'll bring on guys like Jay Lethal. He'll do guys from Ring of Honor. He'll do guys from current and former WWE employees. Guys who are in the NWA. Brings on Jim Cornette fairly often. Those two are riot together.
You remember when they in '97 when they did commentary together? It was awesome.
Yes.
Damn, Kevin Dunn was like, they sound too Southern. I'm like, fuck off. How about that?
Nothing wrong with Southern wrestling. I mean, a lot of good wrestling came out of the South.
Most of the good wrestling. Because if you watch WWF wrestling from the 70s, it's fucking awful. I'm sorry.
True.
But.
With one exception.
Princess Victoria?
No, I was thinking Billy Graham. I mean, he wasn't a great worker, but those 3 matches he had with Dusty Rhodes.
Those were amazing.
So good.
I want to get back to a point real quick. Not that you jogged my memory here. Now, from what I understand, listen to Bruce Pritchard's podcast, by the way. I just want to give a quick shout out to the Bruce Pritchard's podcast. It's very interesting. Although I don't like what he has to say very often, especially when he talks about current wrestling, because I think we have different wrestling sensibilities. But it's not offensive to me where like I have to shut it off. I just don't like that portion of it. But the knowledge he has of professional wrestling, especially WWE, he's probably the closest thing we'll ever get to having Vince McMahon have his own podcast. Because I think their mindsets are very similar or exactly the same. So if you listen to Bruce Pritchard, a.k.a. Brother Love, for those of you who don't know, he's basically on the creative team for like 20 years. So, there's not a whole lot of people that have not, been closer to Vince other than like Pat Patterson, right? But he was mentioning on a show, I believe, that Vince McMahon wanted a larger-than-life star, like a superstar, to kind of, like, we're going to get away from Backlund, we want something big. And he'd wanted Dusty Rhodes to be, like, the new guy for the WWF. But something happened where, like, I think Vince didn't like Dusty's ego or something. Something ran, just like he didn't like it. He did something about it, like the situation went bad. And that never went anywhere. So they did, because when they brought in him to face Billy Graham, it's like kind of like a test. It's like, oh, will he get over New York? Okay, he will get over New York. When we're ready to make the switch, and I'm ready to go national, what have you, I'm probably going to go with Dusty. Which is interesting, because I was wondering, like, hey, he went with Hogan, but why didn't he go with Dusty? And that would have changed the landscape of the NWA, everything.
Oh, huge. It's hurting my head thinking of all the different changes that would have happened. Because a lot of things that happened, for example...
No Starrcade?
No Starrcade, Great American Bash, Halloween Havoc was one of his. Who knows if Ron Simmons would have become world champion? And then, of course, Hulkamania. Who knows where that would be? Would it be as strong as it is today?
Would have AWA survived because Hogan wouldn't have left.
True, there could have been more competition there.
Or if Hogan would have went down to Crockett, maybe we would have got that Hogan Flair match like in '84. Instead of
that would be interesting.
So like that's a whole different dynamic and time paradox. Maybe I'll do a project where Dusty Rhodes is the WWF champion and going forward. But again, that's according to Bruce Pritchard and what he said. I don't know that for a fact because Vince doesn't talk to me, so he doesn't return my calls, doesn't return my emails. So yeah, so you'll never know. But that's what he claims. But
we can speculate.
Yeah, we can definitely speculate, and doing these shows, that's what we do. He's like, we're going to talk about it. So, All right, fantastic. So, guys, in closing and wrapping this up, I'd like to congratulate Roddy Piper on winning the United States Championship from Wahoo McDaniel and Cell Matt. Well, it's a Hell in the Cell, but we can't call it Hell in the Cell. But Rage in the Cage. Okay, Rage in the Cage.
There we go.
It's Rage in the Cage. Ricky Steamboat did defeat Jesse Ventura, who is on loan from the AWA, by the way. And Harley Race did defeat Kurt Hennig in their championship match for the NWA Championship. So curious to see where they go from here. Our next episode will be another compilation episode of all the great matches around the entire NWA. And then I will be leading into our Superdome show from Louisiana. Mid-South Wrestling will be hosting the NWA in the Superdome. The main event of that pay-per-view or special event, closed-circuit event, struggling for a word to describe super show, whatever. The main event of that show will be the Junkyard Dog versus Ted DiBiase for the North American Heavyweight Championship. In addition, you will see Ronnie Garvin versus Jake Roberts for the TV Championship. In the finals of our United States Tag Team Tournament, you will see Giant Baba and Tenryu take on the Guerreros for the United States Tag Team Championship. That's a real interesting match. Again, that's based on our tournament results. Again, folks, I do not book these shows. The computer comes up with the results on these, so anything can happen. That's how we have Baba and Tenryu in the finals against the Guerreros. I would have preferred like the Fabulous Ones versus the Midnight Express or something. But that's just me. What are you going to do? I don't know. So I just want to thank Michael Swanson for joining me on this episode of the 1983 Project. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll do one in the near future again. Love having you as a guest. It was fantastic. Did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on here. This isn't the first time I've ever done anything like this at all, and we'll definitely be getting on here again.
All right, fantastic. So for Michael Swanson,